This little white Charolais calf right here. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I had him put away in the preconditioning pen. Him and that Brangus heifer in front of him right there. I had them two put away in the preconditioning pen because they were having a difficult time digesting the feed. And so I figured I would precondition them for a little longer, and I did that, and you know, he got better, and then I let him out. But over the last couple of days, this animal right here, the little white Charolais heifer, or the little white Charolais steer, I'm not sure why, but he's starting to wobble around again. He's starting to wobble around, and usually when the animals are wobbling around, like if it looks like that, you see how he's kind of just wobbling around. I know that he's trying to poop right now, but well, I know, and his manure looks his manure looks good. And you know, I'm not sure, but he's wobbling around. I don't know if he's just if that's just how he walks. I'm not sure, but he's kind of wobbling around, and that's not exactly a good sign. And also, you see him right there, he's kind of panting. And so but he doesn't look sick. And so, you know, the whole thing about you know, when they're wobbling around, it's usually, you see that he's kind of panting and he's kind of coughing, but he doesn't look sick. He's just been like that for a while. I don't know exactly what's going on with him, but you see how he's wobbling around like that? But usually when they do that, it's because they can't digest their feed, and they're having a difficult time digesting their feed. But this animal, he doesn't, I mean, he's eating. I mean, he's eating, and he doesn't look sick. And so I'm not exactly sure what's going on with him. I can still kind of see the ribs on the side of his body. And so I'm not sure what's going on with this calf. You know, maybe I just got to, you know, leave him to it for a couple more weeks. I don't know. But I'm thinking maybe I'd put him in the preconditioning pen again. You know, I'm thinking maybe I'll put him away in the preconditioning pen. And, you know, I may do that, you know, but if he's eating food out here, I'm just going to leave him out here to eat some food. And then, you know, sometimes he'll actually go in that preconditioning pen by himself and just lay there for a couple of hours. And I figured if he does that, I may just leave him in there. But okay, but here's the thing. All right, you know, let's talk about what I had going on over the last 2 months. All right. When I take a look at it for what it is, okay, over the last 2 months, I actually grew my business by over 50%, right? Just about 50. And that's what I talk about, 25% growth a month. And I grew my business by about 50% over the last 2 months. You know, I started off with like 35 animals, something like that. I started off with 35 and now I got 50. And here's the thing, I actually have enough money still left over from the money that I made 2 weeks ago. I still have enough money left over to buy another 8 animals, 7 animals, something like that. All right, from the money that I made, you know, from the money that I made a week and a half ago, I still have enough money left to buy 7 more animals, but I am at maximum capacity. All right, I am at maximum capacity. You know, I'm at maximum capacity right now. I've been thinking maybe, you know, maybe I extend the barn out a little bit. I'm gonna figure it out. You know, you know, the whole thing about this situation is that, you know, I'm looking to buy more land. All right, I'm looking to buy more land. You know, I make plenty of money. I figure that the bank's gonna give me a loan and I just go and buy myself more land. But here's the thing. All right, you know, let's talk about it in terms of, you know, in terms of a multi-dimensional situation. The money, you know, okay, so I grew my business by about 50% over the last 2 months by just taking the money that I make in my business and putting it back into my business, right? That's called, you know, just reinvesting the earnings. And I actually still have enough money left to buy 7 more animals. Legitimately, I do. I still, you know, when I sold the animals and I made the money and then I started reinvesting the money, I legitimately still have money left over from selling the animals, right? I am not taking any debt. All right, I'm not taking any debt. I've already paid for everything that I need, and et cetera, et cetera. I've already paid for everything that I need. I still have a large amount of stabilized animals. You know, I still have you know, multiple animals that are already, you know, borderline already ready to go to full market, et cetera, et cetera. And so in this situation that I'm in, you know, the amount of money that I'm making is actually compounding upwards. All right, the amount of money that I am making is compounding upwards, and it is going upwards very quickly. All right, you know, the amount of, you know, and this is, you know, it just is what it is, okay? You know, And I've talked about this. At the end of the day, right, it just is what it is. I'm the one, I'm the one who actually put in the work, and I'm the one who actually put in the effort to learn how to make all this money. And when you take a look at what I do, I effectively have some of the best results in the world. Legitimately the best by a long shot. I legitimately make massively more money than the median income, massively more money. All right, I can legitimately start these businesses effectively whenever. All right, and my businesses are massively profitable. I'm actually compounding growth by about 25% a month, maybe a little bit more, and I'm not even using any debt. I'm only taking the money that I make in my business and putting it back into my business, and I'm still growing my business by about 25% compounding every month. Am I going to continue, am I going to continue not using debt? No, I'm not. Okay, I will use debt. All right, using debt gives me tax benefits, and it increases my income. And granted that I do it knowledgeably, and granted that I, thoroughly understand what I am leveraging for, right, I won't even be taking my balance sheet negative. All right, it just is what it is. At the end of the day, why would I care? If you're going to be a loser bum, then be a loser bum by yourself. All right, die poor, have fun with that. Nobody cares. All right, at the end of the day, I actually did it. All right, I actually did it. All right, farming is not some easy thing. Farming, most people cannot farm at all. Legitimately, when it comes to farming is one of those things where it's like you either make it or you don't. Legitimately, and most people don't make it. I actually do not know anybody even doing 10%. All right, farming is incredibly difficult. Borderline, like nobody can do it. And I managed to do it so well that I actually made more money as a cattleman than anybody on the planet just about. Short of people like Warren Buffett. All right, and it just is what it is. At the end of the day, I actually did it. I'm living proof. I actually did it. And what does this look like? Over the last 2 months, I actually grew my business by a 25% monthly compounding rate. Even right now, I am actually having difficulty reinvesting all of the money that my business makes. I actually make, in terms of, I call it, I'm at maximum capacity. I am effectively at maximum capacity, and I'm still sitting on money. All right, and here's the thing, is that the frequency of my payments has increased. I will actually be paying myself more frequently for the same amount of money. So when you take a look at it for what it is, I will actually, as time progresses, if I do not, and I've already said that the whole thing about what I'm looking to do is to buy myself a new piece of land. I will re-leverage myself here in about 2 months. And when I do that, I will buy myself a new piece of land, right? Why am I going to do that? And the whole situation is that effectively, instead of 2 separate herds, think about it as 3 separate herds. I am increasing the frequency of my payment by 50%. If I increase the size of my herd by 50%, then I will increase the frequency of my payment by 50%, right? I went from having 35 animals. When I had 35 animals, it was like I had 2 separate herds, right? I had the stabilized herd, and then I had the high risk herd. But now I have 50 animals, and when I have 50 animals, it's more reasonable to think about it as me having 3 separate herds. Right, I have 3 separate herds right now. The first 2 set of animals are stabilized, but the first set is bigger than the second one, and the third one is high risk. I'm still working on stabilizing them, right? So now it's like I have 3 separate herds. I went from 35 animals to 50 animals. When I go from 35 to 50 animals, I am increasing the frequency of the payment that I pay myself. So I am going to pay myself the same amount of money, but I will pay myself more frequently. I will increase my income by 50%. And the whole idea is that, as I compound forward, right? And, and I'm already at maximum capacity. I'm actually already in a situation where I am sitting on cash. I legitimately still have money left over from the animals that I, sold, a week and a half ago. I still grew my business by 50%, and I will actually have another set of animals ready to go for market in 1.5 months. And I will effectively have the same number of animals ready to go. All right, and then another month and a half after that, I'll have another set of animals. All right, and then another month and a half after that, I'll have another set of animals. And so in this situation, I'm already at maximum capacity. All right, I am at maximum capacity. All right, I understand, I've taken a look at it, and I understand what is happening. All right, I am making an astronomical sum of money. I understand that. All right, and in this situation, what should I do with the money is effectively the big idea. And I have decided to grow my business. All right, I will grow my business. All right, this is the whole thing that I got going on right now. I will grow my business. I'm not going to go and buy myself a Lamborghini. All right, I'm not going to go and buy myself 3 Lamborghinis. I'm not going to go and buy myself what I understand that I make a massive amount of money, and I need to figure out what will I do with this money. All right, I effectively make more money as a cattleman than anybody on the planet makes doing anything. Legitimately, and it's by a lot. All right, and I can start these businesses whenever I feel like it. I will actually end up starting myself another farm here very soon. All right, and so, the whole thing, it just is what it is. All right, I understand. I've taken a look at it. I'm the one who worked for it. I'm the one who can actually do it. At the end of the day, if it comes down to it, I'll be rich by myself. Why, after, and I've talked about this a lot, I talk about this a lot. After a certain point, you can't really even save people. It effectively just becomes too late. And I talk about this, the whole idea of the moron megazord. When you have something like you got a bunch of, effectively a bunch of people that are just lumped together, and they all are effectively having the exact same problem, and nobody's working on getting better at anything. Everybody's just looking for validation, and they're all just sitting there in a group hug, right? That's not good. All right, you should go out into your life and look to do better for yourself. All right, it's very important. Even if, and I talked about this, even if you have to leave everybody for dead, you should do it. All right, I'm not talking about it from a malicious sense. I'm not talking about being malicious. Even if it comes down to, and this is also something that I understand that I made my peace with God with. I effectively just had to leave everybody for dead, and I said, what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to be successful. I've actually decided mentally, I have decided that I will go out and be successful, right? And I will do better for myself, even if that means I have to leave everybody behind. I understand that. All right, and is it, but at the end of the day, and I made my peace with God about it. I'm not being a malicious person about it. It just is what it is. All right, I've even decided, you see all of this right here, this 10.5 acre field, over the next several months, I will leave all of this behind. All right, and I will go and I will expand my business. And when I expand my business, I will actually expand my business very drastically. The whole big idea is that I'll just leave, 20 cattle here, and I'll plant some Bermuda grass. And just to put things in perspective, I would actually anticipate that over the next 2.5 months, my cattle farm will make just about $100,000 in just the next 2.5 months. I will make $100,000 on this cattle farm in the next 2.5 months just off of running cattle. Legitimately. All right, just off my cattle business in the next 2.5 months, I will make about $100,000. And guess what? My income is actually compounding upwards. I'm not even going to use any debt. My income is compounding upwards. This is also what I mean by my income is going up astronomically. All right, as of this point in time, I called it the point of inflection. The amount of money that I am making is going up in terms, because here's the thing, and I talked about this in terms of a realistic sense. When I first started my business, I had about 5 or 7 animals. All right, that's what I started off with. I had 5 or 7 animals. And over the next 2.5 years, I managed to grow my herd by about 1,000%. Just by taking the money, reinvesting it, and using a little bit of debt. That's how I grew my business. I took the money that I made, I've reinvested it into my business, and then I used a little bit of debt. And when I did that, I managed to grow my business by over 1,000% over 2.5 years. And as of today, when I take a look at what I am doing and what I have accomplished, I am effectively now in a situation where I have 50 animals. I have grown my business by 50% over the last 2 months. I have money still in the bank. I can still buy 7 more animals. I can still buy 8 more animals. And I am not using any debt. I am legitimately using 0 debt, and my business is still compounding a 25% monthly growth. And in terms of a financial number, I would anticipate that my business makes $100,000 in the next 2.5 months. All right, that's what I reasonably anticipate. Maybe it takes me 3 months. All right, and so that's what my numbers look like today. And and when I hit that point where I was like, oh, I'm actually taking a look at it, and the amount of money that I am making has become so drastic that I can effectively buy anything on the planet. I called that the point of inflection, and I talk about this in terms of a reasonable sense. Once the amount of money that you make hits a certain point, you can effectively buy anything on the planet. What is that number? Once you start bringing home about $15,000 a month, you can effectively buy anything. Granted that you're not an idiot. If you legitimately lived on $10,000 a month and invested $5,000 a month for the rest of your life, you would have unlimited money. If all you did was buy the S&P 500 as your investment, if that was all you did, you would have unlimited money. All right, that's how it works out. All right, effectively, that's how the economy works as of today. Will things change in 50 years? Probably. All right, I talk about the broader, economic system, right? The debt-based system, the credit-based system, right? And you can print dollars, but you can't print assets, etc., right? And the value of your dollar will probably go down over a long period of time. All right, it probably will. And so, and in terms of a realistic sense, as of today, I actually make enough money running cattle to effectively do anything on the entire planet. I can legitimately buy anything on the entire planet. I've taken a look at it and I understand. So what am I going to do with the money? I will expand my business. All right, that's what I have decided to do with the money. But I mean, when I take a look at it for, what it is right now, I actually still have enough money left over from the animals that I sold a week and a half ago to buy 7 more animals. Legitimately, 5 to 7 more animals, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and something like that animals, depending on how small or how big I buy them. And I have already grown my business by 50% in the last 2 months. And I am not using any debt at all, legitimately 0 debt. Am I going to continue using 0 debt? No, I'm not. I will utilize leverage. And in terms of, it just is what I legitimately do not know anybody that's even doing 10%. I legitimately don't even know any, if I found somebody that, I have not seen anybody even do 10%. Most people cannot even make $35,000 a year on a 10.5 acre field. Most people can't. Legitimately, a majority of people can't. All right, and when I take a look at my situation, I would reasonably anticipate, honest to God is my witness, I'm not lying about it, I am telling you the truth, I would reasonably anticipate that my business makes about $100,000 over the next 3 months with me just running cattle. Just my cattle business will make about $100,000 over the next 3 months. And guess what? My income will compound upwards. I am already in a situation where I actually cannot grow my business to its maximum amount, simply because I am out of land. So how will I solve this problem? I will go and buy more land. All right, I will go and buy more land. I'm taking a look at a couple of different properties. I will go and buy myself more land. The whole idea with this property is that I will just, I'll plant some Bermuda grass out here. I'll just come by and I'll just drop off about 20 animals. But I've already even decided to leave this all, I'm just going to collateralize this property for a line of credit, cash flow the property, float the debt, and then just go and do bigger and better things. All right, but even this, I've already decided to, I'm moving forward, right? I'm actually going to go and do better for myself. All right, and, and I talked about this, the whole idea of doing better for yourself, and you may legitimately have to leave everybody behind. You may have to, all right, because at the end of the day, I talk about this like the analogy that I use for this, the story that I use for this is, imagine that you have a bunch of people that have convinced themselves that there is an island of gold, right? There is an island of gold, and all they have to do is swim out into the ocean and find this island of gold. And a lot of people will end up swimming out in in all random directions, by themselves for no reason. And then eventually what will happen is that they will get to a point where they can't swim anymore, and now they're starting to panic. Right? And now they're starting to panic. Oh man, and now they're starting to flail in the ocean, right? They're starting to flail, and they've effectively just swam out as far as they could. Maybe even the tide took them out as far as they could go. And now they're starting to freak out because there is no island of gold, right? When in reality, the island of gold has already been found, right? And I talk about this in terms of a realistic sense. If you're not born, okay. And I said this, I'm not being malicious about it, but chances are you're not born smart enough to have a very, a good idea, and including me, right? Like when you take a look at me, I've already said that all of this stuff, I effectively learned how to do it. I didn't just figure this stuff out by myself. I watched presentations from people who legitimately were like, very high level people, right? In terms of what they do, right? Like when I learned about my animal medication, how did I learn about my animal medication? Right? I went on the internet and I looked up presentations on animal, doctors, veterinarians that work for feed yards that have like hundreds of thousands of animals. That's how I learned about animal medication. When I learned about, animal feed, how did I learn about animal feed? Same thing. Animal nutritionist made a presentation on the internet for free. This person runs is the head nutritionist at a feed yard for 150,000 animals. Let me see what they have to say. Let me collect their information, right? That's effectively the analogy of the island of gold. The island of gold has already been found. But you're not going to find it by yourself swimming out into the middle of the ocean for no reason. All right, the island of gold has already been found. All right, even me, and I use this, the whole thing, like me, I am telling you that the island of gold is X on the map right here. I legitimately make like $350,000 a year on 10.5 acres. I am telling you that the island of gold is right here. But after a certain point, it's like, when, and then it's like, just gone out into the middle of the ocean for no reason. Not learning anything, right? Not looking to do better at all. Just simply wants validation, right? Oh, well, I just want validation. That's effectively where a lot of people are at mentally. Chances are you're not going to wake up tomorrow and go, you know what, let me learn something. Let me go and watch this presentation on somebody who has actually figured this out, and let me see what information they have. Chances are you're not going to do that. After a certain point, it's too late. After a certain point, it's too late. All right. And I know that sounds horrible, but what am I supposed to do about it? How are you going to save an idiot from themselves? You can't. All right. It's not possible. All right, but that's the analogy that I used, right? The island of gold. People have already found the island of gold. Legitimate people have already found it, and there are legitimate people on the internet and just everywhere, and even, I guess I'm one of them too. And I tell you exactly where the island of gold is. And I'm not saying that you have to become a farmer to find the island of gold. All right, you can go and you can do whatever you want. You can invest in stocks, right? You can, and I've talked about this. You need to have investments. All right, and I talked about this even the other day. I don't know if it was yesterday or the other day, but you can actually tell, who, it went okay. And the big test to see who actually, because there are a lot of posers, right? There are a lot of posers. There are a lot of people, particularly on the internet, that, just sit there and they'll have their little designer clothing and they'll, whatever. And, oh my God, fake flexing on the internet. And the way that you can actually differentiate legitimate rich people from people like that is to look at their assets. Right, and why do I put such an emphasis on investing in good assets that produce you positive returns? Why do I put such an emphasis on that? When you put your money into something and it gives you a percentage back every single year, why do I put such an emphasis on that? Because if you do not have investments, if your investments are not producing you a return, if your investments are not producing you a return, you will have to work for every dollar that you ever make your entire life. You will get taxed the most, and then you will probably end up dying poor. Legitimately, that's why I put such an emphasis on putting money into assets that produce positive returns. And the whole idea of putting money into assets that produce positive returns is that if you have a good asset, you understand your asset, like the S&P 500, and the S&P 500 produces a 1.26% yield every single year, and it goes up by 7-8% a year on the average. It will go up by about 6-8% a year on the average, and it will also produce you a 1.26% dividend. Because of that yield, theoretically, if we're going to talk about a pie in the sky, if we're going to talk about a theoretical situation, you theoretically cannot lose money if you hold on to the stock for all eternity. You can't. Why? Because it produces a positive yield. It will always give you that positive yield. For you to lose money in the S&P 500 over a long period, over infinity, the dividend would have to go to zero. All right, and that's effectively why I put such an emphasis on these ideas, right? Why, when you actually want to see who's rich, because there are a lot of fake rich people, right? And I've talked about this. You could legitimately be making $400,000 a year and still be a practical bum. You can practically still be a bum. Even, it doesn't matter if your income is high, right? If you have money and you're an idiot, you're just an idiot with money. All right, and chances are you're not going to make it anywhere your entire life. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. Legitimately, that's what happens. But the way to differentiate between legitimate rich people and fake rich people is to take a look at their assets. That's how you do it, right? That's how you take a look at their assets. Oh, this person, makes a substantial amount of money. He runs his own business. He's growing his business by 25%, compounding every month, maybe even more, right? I've listened to his ideas, and he has clearly indicated exactly what he is doing. And I actually think that he's going to do it. And if anything, he has a long track history. He has a long history of actually outperforming his own estimates. Well, that's very good. You're probably talking about a rich person, a legitimate rich person. Oh, well, this person is on the internet with a Lamborghini and an apartment that they're leasing, or that they're renting apartment because, whatever, right? And I don't even know what business they're in. I don't know if their business is even making money. I just know that they have a Lamborghini and an apartment. That person is probably not rich. It just is what it is, all right? That's how you tell. All right, you take a look at their assets. Are their assets producing any kind of a return? Where are they putting their money? That's how you tell. Because if you do not have assets, and if your assets, even if you have assets, if your assets are not producing a positive return, if they are not producing you a positive return, you will have to work every day for the rest of your life. You will get taxed the most. You will have to work for every dollar that you make. I'm not going to say you have to work every day for the rest of your life, because, like me, I will probably work every day for the rest of my life. I probably will, and I will do it by free choice. Legitimately, that's what I feel like doing. All right, I've worked every day for for my entire life for a long time. And but the thing is that you will have to work for every dollar that you have, every single last one. And the moment that you stop working, you will have no money. That's what will happen if you have no assets that produce a positive return. And I talked about this in terms of the amount of money to put into an asset. Let's say that you are looking to, accumulate enough assets on a monthly basis to effectively put yourself in a situation where over the long term, you won't ever have to worry about money. And let's use the S&P 500 as an example. How much money are we talking about? About $2,000 a month. At about $2,000 a month, if you find a way to make $2,000 a month extra money, and you don't spend any of it, and you take that money and you put it in the S&P 500 every month for the rest of your life, you will effectively never worry about money again. Legitimately. Granted that you don't become an idiot. Legitimately, you won't. If you buy $2,000 worth of the S&P 500 every month for the rest of your life, you'd be good to go. All right, you know, you don't need to become a farmer, you know, and I talk about this all the time, you know, chances are you're not going to become a farmer. All right, you know, in terms of a realistic sense, I legitimately don't know anybody that does even 10%. Most people cannot even make $35,000 a year on a 10.5 acre field. Most people can't even do that. All right, you know, and it just is what it is. If you legitimately want to become a farmer, how would I suggest you go about it? Right? You're going to have to learn how to grow a crop. You're going to have to learn how to run cattle, and you're going to have to learn how to run a business all at the same time by yourself. And this is also what I call the barrier of entry to farming, right? Because when it comes to farming, if you're legitimately looking to become a farmer, chances are you're not going to go in and apply for a job to be a farmer. If you're going to become a farmer, chances are you will have to start your own farm by yourself. And in this situation, legitimately nobody will help you, and that's effectively the situation that I'm in. Do I look like I'm going to go and get help to plant my crop? Do I look like I'm going to go and get help to, you know, run my business? Or my cattle, right? I mean, you know, my cattle, I take them to the vet now because I figured I would spend some money, you know, to just take them to the vet, because the whole thing is that I legitimately have to work these cattle by myself. And, you know, if I'm trying to run 50 animals through a chute by myself, it kind of turns into a mess. You know, it turns into a very, very, very just kind of a high, it just kind of turns into a mess. And so, you know, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm having to run 50 cattle through a chute by myself. And so I've started taking my cattle to the vet. You know, if my animals need antibiotics, I'll give them a shot. But, you know, other than that, you know, I effectively do everything else by myself. Effectively, I do 99.9% of this all by myself. And, you know, before this year, I actually did it all by myself. You know, when it comes to like starting the business and running the business and legitimately getting this business started, I legitimately did it all by myself. I'm not lying about it. All right, you know, I had to learn how to farm. I had to learn how to grow the grass. I had to learn how to run the cattle. I had to learn how to run the business. I am legitimately a first-generation farmer. And as of today, I actually make more money farming cattle than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything. And it's by a lot. All right, and you know, and I've already decided what will I do with the money and etc., etc. All right, you know, I've taken a look at it. I understand what's happening, and I have decided that this is what I will do. Okay. You know, I will be growing my business. As of today, I'm actually in a situation where I have grown my business by about 50% in the last 2 months. And I am still sitting on enough money to expand my business even more. And I have not used any debt at all. I am just taking the money that I make in my business, in my cattle business, just taking that money and putting that money back into my business. And when I do that, I legitimately compound growth my business by about 25 to 33% a month. And I am not using any debt. But when it comes to legitimately, like if you're looking, you know, because I've even spoken about this in terms of a realistic sense. When you actually, you know, when you take a look at the numbers, right? Because at the end of the day, you can take a look at my assets and it is what it is. But when you take a look at my numbers, and me, the thing about this is that I didn't even know that it was happening until after it happened. Legitimately. I wasn't like, I wasn't sitting there like going, oh my God, you know, I want to make this amount of money. And I legitimately did better than I thought. I didn't, you know, it was whatever to me. And I legitimately ended up in like the top 0.00001% of the entire U.S. economy for the year of 2024. I legitimately did it. And I didn't even know that it was happening until after it happened. All right, and this year I'm actually even doing better than that. All right, you know, my income is actually compounding upwards. All right, you know, effectively what we're talking about is that there are only 20,000 people in the entire country. Effectively about 20,000 people that can generate money like me. Legitimately, only 20,000. So, you know, and the entire country is like 334 million people. If you put 334 million people in a room, there would only be 20,000 of us that can make money like this. I legitimately don't know anybody that can generate money like me. Not a single person. And I would love to meet, more people that can generate money like me. That'd be fantastic. Well, at the end of the day, it's whatever. I don't want to meet a loser, whatever, right? I mean, what would I? It's whatever. To me, I don't ever, whatever. Me, if I legitimately work by myself for the rest of my life, I can still make enough money to do anything on the planet by a lot. I'm not gonna go out my way to, meet some whatever. I don't care. All right, I don't care. Nobody has enough money to offer me anything. All right, nobody has enough money to offer me anything. I don't care about your deal. All right, I legitimately make enough money to do whatever already. Effectively anything. It doesn't matter. All right, legitimately doesn't matter. I don't care about your deal. Die tomorrow and take your deal with you. Trust me, I don't care. Nobody has enough money to pay me to do anything. Even if I lost all of this today, I could redo it all in 3 seconds, all right? It doesn't matter. And so it is what it is. But, I'm completely serious about it. I mean, that's one of the big benefits about legitimately, being in a situation where you have, effectively just, you've effectively earned you've actually earned the becoming rich. That's one of the big benefits of that, is that legitimately nobody can hold money over you. There is no amount of money that anybody can pay me to do anything, because I can already make enough money to do anything on the planet already. Legitimately, if I just continue to farm, I will legitimately make such a large amount of money that money becomes negligible. That's one of the big benefits. And another big benefit of learning to become rich and actually becoming a wealthy individual is that even if I lost everything, let's say that I lost my farm and I lost whatever and I lost everything, I could redo it all in 3 seconds. I would legitimately just redo everything, and then I would just start making myself money again. Legitimately, right? I mean, I could redo this all in 3 seconds. That's one of the big benefits. It doesn't matter, all right? Money is negligible to me already. And that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.